Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Design Fireside Chat at Google I/O 2016. My name is Mike Denny. I am a design advocate on the Google Design team, and today we really want to have kind of an informal, casual conversation. We've gathered 5 design leaders from across Google, from different disciplines, different teams, and we really want to have this session be a cross-section of what it looks like to design at Google, the processes, how we think about things, and really hoping that you enjoy the conversation. We've solicited questions on social media, we've come up with some of our own, and we're really looking for that kind of holistic design at Google feeling. So we're going to start with some introductions. We're just going to kind of give each panelist a couple minutes to introduce themselves, their background, kind of where they came from before Google, and what they do at Google, and then we'll get into some questions.
I'll start. I'm Nicholas Jitkov. I am a sort of design and eng lead on the material design team. I actually started out out of college working for a financial firm and started writing software on the side and parlayed that into coming here as a software engineer originally. I've been at Google for 8 or 9 years or so, but have moved over time from software engineering into doing more of a design role, but still working pretty actively with engineers and also with product and marketing people. A lot of the work the material team does tends to span across a lot of those different efforts. We touch branding, and we touch the products that are being built. So.
Hi, I'm Marta. I'm the lead researcher for Core Bench UX, which is an internal team that work on internal websites and applications for Googlers worldwide. I also started my UX career in finance in a bank in Spain at the beginning of the 2000s when all the companies were going crazy into having presence online, and we didn't know what we were doing yet at the end of the 90s. So I started, and it became a passion of mine. And I came to the US from Spain 13 years ago, and loving being here.
Hello, I'm Kevin, and I have been at Google for 3.5 years. I work in YouTube, and my background is sort of a combination of a few different mini careers, part engineer, part designer, part marketer / MBA, and all of that sort of led me to Google. I worked at IDEO. That was the company I worked at before. I was there for a very long time, 11 years. And when I decided to join Google, I was really curious about trying to blend the best of what I learned at IDEO, which to me felt like a great company to learn at, and then blend that with Google, which is another great company that does a lot of things. And in some ways, the companies are similar. In some ways, the companies are a little bit different. And so what I've been doing over the last few years is I created a group at YouTube called the Visioning Team, which is an attempt for me to sort of blend these different methods together to identify areas for innovation for YouTube and help teams define a clear path forward for their product.
Great. Hi, I'm Catherine. I work on Google's Brand Studio. Brand Studio is actually on the marketing side of Google, and we're sort of in a unique position where we work with all different product teams and marketing teams across Google, so we try to connect the dots. We are comprised of strategists, filmmakers, designers, developers, and most of our projects range in size from creating new identities to Chrome extensions to even worrying about packaging tape. I mean, all sorts of things. My background, I wanted to be a cartoonist. So it really wasn't so much in like the technology sphere. I wanted to do political cartooning, but then when I got to art school, I really fell in love with brand design and typography. I am obsessed with typography and systems of brand design, so with anything that has like a font stint to it, that's where I like to be.
Hey, so I'm Alex, and I've worked at Google for almost 11 years now. It still feels like I'm relatively new to Google because everything changes every day there. I'm really excited to be working on the Google Assistant, so I'm a design lead on that project. And I'm also working on a bunch of new initiatives that we have in and around search and maps, which is my home base. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is bringing in some new roles into UX, such as motion design and UX engineering, which are some things we've been building up over the last few years.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So to get started, I think the first question I'd like to have us talk about is more on the process side of things, how we approach things. And I think we'll start with Kevin, but I think maybe multiple people will be able to weigh in just because Google's a large company, different teams do things different ways. How do teams at Google decide what to build before actually building it?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about what we're doing on the visioning team and how we're trying to enhance our process at YouTube to do that. It's a little daunting because when I joined Google and joined YouTube, I was interested in evolving our processes to be better. But you have to come in with a little bit of humility because it's a very, very successful company. So you don't want to come in and say, "Oh, that's wrong. What are we doing?" So I had to kind of think about ways to address, but also at Google, we want to, I think part of our culture is to keep getting better, so people are very open to how can we be better. So I'll talk about 3 things that we try to do in the visioning team to help. And again, we're working on kind of the early stage. So if you think about product development, which is designing and developing and building a product, product vision is kind of the step before that, which is, well, what should we build before we start going and building? How do we figure out what the right thing to build is? We could build 1,000 different things, but what's the right thing to do? So I'd say that from a process perspective, there's a few things that we're trying to do that are a little bit different maybe than what the norm is in the tech industry. So the first one is we try to think about, some of this probably sounds obvious, but I think when you're in the thick of things, it can be very difficult to do, which is, what we try to do is focus on what's the ideal product that we could get to in a couple years. Not 4 or 5 years out because the tech industry changes a lot, but what's the ideal experience we can get to? That's a little bit different than I think maybe more of a lean approach, which the tech industry often uses, which is let's just build something as quickly as possible, get it out there, and then learn. I think that's still a great philosophy, but we want to put just a little bit more rigor in thinking about what's the thing we want to shoot for before we put something out there. Second thing is this idea of, and it really relates to the first thing as well, which is we want to feel like if we are going to put something out in the marketplace and then learn, we feel like that's kind of an expensive way to learn. So how can we fail faster, more often internally with rough prototypes, really quick ways to explore many different things so that when we do converge on something, probably take a little bit longer, but then when we converge on it, our odds of success are much higher. And the third thing that we try to do from a process standpoint is this idea of visioning. I think that traditionally, sometimes people think that it's either like the leader of the organization who creates the vision and then kind of tells everybody, or sometimes people think, well, that's the product manager's job. What we try to do is democratize product vision. What we try to do is get everybody on the team to participate in that process so that instead of someone telling them, well, here's the vision, now go design against it, everybody on the team has participated and feel like they own and buy the vision. So that's what we try to do on the visioning team at YouTube.
I'm wondering, Marta, maybe you could chime in on design sprints.
Yeah, totally. So I arrived to Google around 3 years ago. Core Bench UX was a very tiny team. We were only 4 people in the team. And we were redesigning a very big product, internal product, which is the performance evaluation tool. The deadlines were crazy. And there was no time for design, no time for research. And at the time, we had a ton of meetings, half decisions were made here, then another decision was made in another meeting. So it was a very difficult process. So one of the things that I thought was, why don't we bring everyone to a room and we make the decisions that we need to make? Let's clear our agendas for 5 days and let's give everyone a voice. Engineering, whoops, and it did fall. Okay.
We can still hear you.
You still hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. So let's give engineering a voice. There are a lot of engineering constraints around this tool. We're migrating from old code to a new code. So what are the constraints that we have? The designers as well. We had a ton of research done. We had business needs. So let's give everyone in the room a voice. And once we all know what is the space in which we are designing, then let's make decisions. And it was a gigantic success. So from a team of people in which we had a very tight deadline, we were working crazy hours to a process that ended up being much more organized, where features ended up being built within only 5 days, and everyone was more in the same page. So after that, design sprinting became a thing. One of the processes that we have internally to redesign tools, come up with new tools, come up with visions for tools, think about completely new tools that don't exist right now. And it all starts by understanding the space from everyone's point of view. And it's exciting. It's a very exciting way of working because everyone feels very energized. People don't feel that they are in just one space, either designing or coding, but everyone is on the same room making these decisions.
Awesome. So let's, this is, anyone jump into this. This is a broad question that probably we all have experience with. What defines a good relationship between you as a designer and another discipline? I know that we are all kind of there's a lot of disciplines represented here in our backgrounds. We're all doing designy stuff now, right? So how do you approach that kind of workflow collaboration between someone who might not understand your skill set and you might not understand theirs?
I think it's a combination of conversation and mutual respect. So at the end of the day, everybody wants to do the same thing. We want to ship something really great. We want to get that out to our users, and we want the feature or the product that we're working on to be really successful. The difference comes down to people have differences of opinion of what that should be and how you should get there. And so you solve those through conversation, and having a closer loop between design and engineering makes it possible to work out things as they arise on the fly and to have the conversations. Oh, we can't do this. What could we do as an alternate? Or, hey, I thought of this idea. Maybe Inge is bringing back some design ideas. They should be part of the conversation too, because in the end, they're responsible for the user experience of the product as well. And the mutual respect thing comes down to, at the end of the day, designers have to do design and engineers have to do engineering. So at some point, you have to say, you know what? I trust this person to do what they do. I know they're making good decisions, and I'm going to let them run with it and empower them to make the decisions they need to make.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Trust is huge, and I ask a million questions. I work with engineers on a lot of the brand identities that we do, and I frankly, I don't know how they do what they do, so I ask all the time, and I kind of explain to them. So sometimes we had this waterfall approach where I'll say, okay, move the design, make it look like that with no context. When you're not giving context to the decisions you make, you kind of feel like you're at odds. But one thing that's really been useful, especially with collaborations with other disciplines, is that everyone is at the table at the very beginning of the project. So we all know what the common goal is, we all know what the user expectation is, and we all know what success might look like and what the expectations for the project are. I think that when not everyone's in the room to hear when things kick off or get the entire brief, it's much harder for everyone to be on the same page.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, with both of those questions, we've been talking about kind of getting people from all the different disciplines together, the decision makers, the designers, the developers, in the same room before you invest in actual product design and development. What's the best way to get engineers and decision makers involved early on in the design process, in particular with research, with things that we do as designers at the early stages? How can we better involve engineers in that process?
Scotch tape. Scotch tape is the answer.
I was going to answer, and then I was like, well, I'm not ready, so hopefully he'll lengthen the question a little bit longer, so I'll be ready. I do have a thought on that, because I think that's, first of all, I want to underscore this idea of getting people in a room together for maybe a day or two to work. It sounds, again, so basic, but when I joined Google, what I noticed, and this is probably true of most of tech world and even corporate America, is people actually don't get a lot of time together to actually collaborate. They'll have a status meeting, but there's a lot of these tiny little shards of communication and comments and docs and email threads, and it's just, there's so much power in just this basic concept of getting people in the room, getting the right people in the room. But one thing that we do to get people involved, so in our visioning projects, like I said, we want this to be a democratic process. One of the things that is required to do that is actually to rethink the relationships a little bit that we talked about just a minute ago, which is that for most of product development, it makes sense to have researchers who have spent their whole career, they have a PhD in research, and engineers who are good at engineering to have that specialization. But in the visioning process, we actually take a very different approach, which is take your functional hat off, because now at the very beginning of this visioning project, we're going to go learn about our user. So you're all researchers today. In my first year at Google, I sent 15 people out to different schools around the Bay Area because we were looking at the whole the classroom, the whole education area. And I told them, you're all researchers. And they were like, well, I've never been a researcher before. Where's my discussion guide? What do? I don't have a PhD. It's basically like, look, you can go to a school and you can have a conversation with the teacher and you can be curious and listen and just be curious about what it's like to be a teacher. And so the philosophy is like, today we're all going to be a researcher. Tomorrow we're all going to be designers. We're going to create ideas. Now we're going to bring users in. We're all going to be researchers again. So that the way we get involvement is to kind of take the functional hats on and really back up the words, which is, no, we really want you to be involved. Here's your notebook. You're going to go learn about a user. We're relying on you to come back with good insight. So that's how we do it on the visioning team.
Awesome. Kind of to build on that, Marta, how do we select? How do you choose the right people to? I mean, you don't want it to be too big of a team, right? Like, how do you pick the right people from all these different disciplines?
It's so funny. When I teach the academy with Kai, who's another co-founder of the Design Sprint Academy at Google, we tell people, a good number of people is between like 5 and 8 people, like a very small team. You can work together 5 days, very, very focused. So that's what I teach. The reality now in Core Bench is that the last sprint I had 31 people. And I started that meeting saying, you guys, I know everyone likes sprinting. We need to be talking, everyone, and they started adding people, this director and that director, and then at the end, we couldn't cut a single person. So we ended up making it happen. A very, very successful sprint with 30 people sprinting at the same time, communicating with each other during several moments of the day. So, that was quite fun. So I would say, ideally, between 5 and 8 people, have the right people in the room, the people that are decision makers. So you definitely need engineering there. You definitely need design. You need UX there. You need the user. Being in a room, like thinking about how something could be for a user and not getting that user input, it's a beautiful exercise that it might not work. So having that, and then also having the business perspective. There's a lot of knowledge about the space, right? If we're designing a new product that it's going to be launching in 2 years, what's our competition? What is the landscape? So all that knowledge needs to be in that room, and the right people, and then the decision makers. So it's a very good idea to invite directors or VPs to kick off that sprint or come to the last presentation or participate.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. You've mentioned a couple times kind of this, you mentioned 5 days, you mentioned a specific range, 5 to 8 people, but at the end of the day, these design processes need to be flexible.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Kai Haley, actually, another designer at Google who works a lot on design sprints, and she gave a talk earlier at Google I/O about using this design sprint approach and being able to feel comfortable being flexible with that. So if you didn't get that session, check it out on YouTube. And we kind of want to shift gears now into kind of beyond the initial process and into actual kind of collaborative design and development. And maybe Nicholas, you can take this first. How do you handle large scale? I mean, Google is a fairly large company with some big ideas and some big projects. How do you handle these large scale design or brand deployments? Things, I mean, lots of new announcements. Recently did a big logo redesign, the assistant, right? So
a lot of the stuff that the small problems that you sort of face within a team, you see in larger form across a larger company. Trying to get sort of tight iteration loops between teams becomes the challenge rather than trying to get it between just design and engineering. In many cases, for things like logo redesigns or anything where it's going to touch multiple products, you need feedback from those products. The material system, a lot of it was developed with the Gmail team or the calendar team or the search team. We took time to visit concepts with them, iterate on them with them, and then bring them back together into a sort of a coherent, documented system. And trying to establish the relationships between teams that don't really speak to each other frequently is sort of the larger challenge. But once those are sort of up and running, you get that same sort of camaraderie and drive towards a common goal. Like Alex and I worked together a fair amount on the branding stuff as we were, him from the search side and me from the material side. And it's really just sort of passing back, like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? How can we adjust the solution to be appropriate for it? And what else has not even been considered yet?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about Google, and I mean maybe all of the industry now, is that everyone is designing at scale. So when you think about the impact of like the sheer numbers of usage that Google has, but also when we think about search and what's that like, we can't just think about one search query, okay, what happens when someone searches for Barack Obama? So even something like the logo change, we really have to test that with just tons and tons of different queries, put it in different contexts to make sure that it's going to work across all the different situations that we need it to do. And that makes the design much more iterative because you start out with some good ideas, you mock a couple of them up, you start finding more and more places that you need to stitch up the design or fix it up later, and that leads to the conversation with engineering, and sometimes changes downstream, but the conversation always helps.
Awesome. And kind of on that topic of branding, Catherine, how would you describe your team, Brand Studio, within Google? What do you guys do, and how do you approach branding products?
Yeah, I think, well, we do a lot of things, but I think one thing that we think about a lot with branding is how different it's become nowadays, especially in the digital era. Branding used to be, here is your big tome, Bible book of brand guidelines, and the brand is telling the user how to react to it, and now it's very different where people actually adapt, or brands actually adapt to people. And we're kind of in an interesting tech time where we know behaviors and what people want and what they want to see, and I think what's important is that the brand is very much like a fluid thing and very much nimble to where I'm thinking of a really good example I've seen recently is I saw this Norwegian brand design, and again, I'm going to get a little nerdy here, was for a shipping company, and the logo itself would always evolve depending on temperature or wind that was around in that particular space. And I thought that was just really, really cool that the brand could adapt to surroundings outside of it. But I think that it's important that brands do evolve, and then Netflix is a great example of that too. It used to be DVDs in the mail, and because of user triggers that they're saying now that they stream, they're doing really well, and HBO's offering us streaming now too, like for free, so we could all be cord cutters. And I think it's just really important that you understand that users are so much more influenced on brands now, then that's how we have to think.
I already know the answer to this, but
yeah,
it would be fun to discuss. So how did that kind of, the evolution of the world and users, the population of the world, all of Google's users, how did the world changing influence our recent Google company-wide redesign, a rebrand?
So I think a lot of the different mediums that we expect people to see things in, like the move to mobile or needing to be able to handle things like watches and TVs, that was largely what led to the brand redesign. Also just sort of the need to be able to adapt to context. I think that search, as you move to mobile, becomes something more around like what is around me, what is relevant right now, and being able to indicate sort of the state of that, being able to modify your brand based on temperature, other things to show sort of relevancy and relatedness to the current situation. You need a slightly more flexible approach in order to handle that, and even handle things you haven't considered yet that will come up over the coming years. The assistant is an evolution of the brand stuff that was done a year ago, and it's building upon it and adding more character that's unique to that specific use case.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, we have to think of brand as an experience. It's not just a mark, it's not a set of guidelines, it's the feeling that users get when they experience your brand, your products. And with the assistant, we're trying to take Google from being this destination, google.com, or this app on your phone, and really bring it to all the other places that you need and find information in your life so that it can be that constant experience that's with you all the time.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about how we don't necessarily want to be bound by, you use the word tome of guidelines, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, we've developed material design. I want to preface by saying that, the goal with material design was to create a cross-platform design system for not just for Google, but for everybody. But I think a lot of developers and designers feel still in that kind of old mentality of they feel bound by this large set of recommendations and guidelines. So how do designers and developers make the best use of material design without feeling restricted by it?
I think the main thing is to approach it as a foundational set of recommendations. Like if you are starting out and you don't really have a good sense of how things are going to be built out, it's a pretty good structure to start looking at stuff. It's critical though that you don't become so tied down by those recommendations that you lose all character. This falls into brand as well, of making sure that the applications that you are designing or building reflect the character of your company, the thing that you're trying to convey to users, and ensuring that it doesn't become so so simple or so focused on just the content in it that it's not identifiable and not unique. Things like the fab that we identified for material design, they're intended to make people ask the right kind of questions. What is the purpose of the application? What do I want to focus people on? It doesn't mean that the incarnation of that has to be a red circle with a white icon on it. It can take any form. It's really just sort of a desire to have focus and move towards the right kind of patterns. So for material, looking at sort of the broader set of guidelines as this is a starting point. What you're really supposed to do is take this and build something that's unique and appropriate for your product, and that makes your product really stand out.
Yeah, I think we're kind of going through that a little bit even within YouTube, because we have a number of apps within YouTube now. We have our main app, we have a kids app, we have a gaming app, we have a music app. And since we started to launch these apps in the last year, there have been a lot of questions about consistency across the apps. Do we have too much inconsistency across the apps? How much consistency do we want to have? And it's a tough one. On the one hand, it should feel like they should all feel like they're coming from YouTube. But there's a reason why we made separate apps. There's a reason why we had the brilliant insight that a 3-year-old might be different than a 27-year-old gamer. But that's the real trick, is it pushes us to think really hard about how are these apps different and how are they the same? And it's an ongoing conversation I think we're going to have as these apps evolve over time.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree 100%. So there's kind of an eternal debate in the design community about whether or not designers should learn to code. And I know we have a mixed group up here with some of us have engineering backgrounds, some of us don't. In my experience, understanding at least the technical feasibility helps inform the design quite a bit. And I know that designers out there would love to have that benefit. Is there an easy way to get that benefit without necessarily going and getting a computer science degree?
I'm staring at my creative engineer in the crowd right now. And he's looking at me, he's like, I'm ready for you to answer this. I don't code, but I sit next to it every single day, and I understand what's possible, and I think that that's what's important. I think kind of the most fun part of I was traditionally a print designer, and what's coming to Google and testing these things in a digital way is sitting next to a developer, asking them, is it possible to do this? And they're like, absolutely not. But then they come back to you an hour later, and they're like, well, yeah, it's possible if we look at it this way, and it's done in this term. So all of my work has gotten exponentially better sitting next to a creative technologist. So for me, they're going to know it better than I'm going to know it. I'm always going to be an expert at the design. I'll let them be an expert at dev. But if you understand it, you have a great working relationship, then I think that is just as useful as being great at both.
Close collaboration, learning through osmosis.
Exactly.
Anyone else?
The other thing is having a sense of what's possible, both from the engineering and design side, and either doing that by having knowledge of the other discipline or just by working closely is great. The other thing is just for both design and engineering, the ability to convey an idea. For designers to convey an idea, sometimes that shows up as being able to code, sometimes it's motion design. A lot of it's about storytelling. The same thing's true of engineering. Prototypes often are one of the most convincing things that we can use in a discussion, because people can actually evaluate stuff versus just guessing about how it will work. So people on any side in any discipline, by thinking about how best to tell the story of this or how best to convey the idea, you end up being far more effective. And often that's done in collaboration with others and by fusing sort of those different talents of design engineering.
We use prototyping for storytelling all the time on search and maps. Pretty much every one of our last big releases has been prototyped in some form, and that's what gets presented to the stakeholders, the VPs, when they make the design decisions. When we made the decision on the logo, we brought in prototypes that my team made to the SVP and was like, this is what search is going to look like. And he played with it for a few minutes and said, okay, this is the search I want, let's do it.
One point about prototyping, too, is that in many cases, you cannot make a decision by looking at sort of fake data. The work we did on Chrome history, like anytime we did a design for Chrome history, if you showed it to somebody and it was just sort of a random set of links that they've never even thought of, it's not useful. You can't evaluate it. If you see your own data presented in a way and you can evaluate those designs, you make a better decision.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
No, go.
No, I've been talking too much.
No, you made me think of a very cool story. I love working very, very closely with engineering all the time, daily. I don't code. I don't know how I got an A in Java in my master's degree. I loved it, but I couldn't believe it that I ended up getting that grade, like the undeserved grade in the history of a Java class ever. Anyway, I remember at one time we had these great findings around how HRBPs who are HR here at Google were using this tool that we use internally, right? And I had this very great insight about a tool that we could do that would improve their lives by a ton. So I remember explaining that after getting these results from several testing, observing several HRBPs and so on. So it was great, and then we were gonna go, like the business side was gonna take it, present it all up the chain in HR. It was gonna be this like several weeks process until, yes, we can do it. And Brendan, who was one of the developers, was in this meeting. So after the meeting, he's like, hey Marta, what are you doing later? And I'm like, I'm gonna be working. He's like, just come to my desk and tell me what to do. Let's do it. And I'm like, serious? And he's like, just build it. And we did. And it was amazing because I was like sitting with him. We were looking at the UI, making the changes, and then we just showed it to everyone. And they were blown away, right? Like it wasn't like this like series of several meetings and let's see if it works or if it doesn't. Like we had it there. We presented it to the HRBPs. They loved it. They adopted it. I got to do more research, which is what I love doing. And it's one of the features that we have right now in one of our internal tools. So stories like that happen. I encourage you to sit with your designer, sit with your researcher, and make things happen.
Can I take your question and steer it in a slightly different direction?
Okay.
Yeah. I think this question of like, should you, if I were to change the question a little bit, like, if you are X, should you also do Y? And at least on the visioning team, the folks that I've tried to hire are people who you might call hybrid type Googlers who have a combination of a little bit of a researcher in them and a little bit of a designer in them. And it's funny because a lot of times when they join the company, people say, "Hi, I'm Joe. What are you a designer? No. Oh, are you a researcher? No." And the answer often is both. And the reason why I think it kind of relates to your question is I think that there's power in, I don't know if you've heard of the term T-shaped people. It's kind of a concept that's been out there for a while, but the concept of a T-shaped person is that they have an area of depth. So they're an engineer or they're a designer, they're a researcher. And then this T is meant to represent sort of a breadth of knowledge or interest in other areas. So for example, maybe you're a designer by trade, but you have a little bit of an appreciation or a knowledge of the business side, or you have a little bit of a researcher in you, or you like to code. I feel like, especially on the visioning team, we look for T-shaped people, but I feel like in general, it's really healthy and good to have some secondary things that you're interested in, because I think it makes you a little bit more versatile. I think it allows you to collaborate better with other people, gives you more perspectives to work with in your job.
Awesome. Yeah, one common theme that has been coming out in multiple questions in this discussion has been the importance of collaboration between these disciplines. Sitting down, designer, engineer, researcher, designer, researcher, engineer, and spending that time together. At the same time, though, everybody has, even on bigger, larger cross-organization efforts, right? Like having lots of meetings to make sure everyone's on the same page and establishing that working relationship, and then actually having the meetings to facilitate and kind of maintain that relationship. How do you strike a good balance between what's on your own plate personally and this collaboration, which we all agree is very important? A brave person can go first.
Take it. So I'm a researcher by trade. There are, well, many schools of thoughts, but a couple of schools of thoughts in the research community. One is, no, we are researchers, we have the knowledge of speaking with the user, making sense of all this data. This is a skill that you don't learn within a day or a month. We are the ones that need to be involved in this. We are the ones leading the research. Great, that's one school of thought, and I agree with many things. And another one, which is the one that I think it's like, I want to open up research to everyone. In every single sprint, I tell people, I'm gonna teach you how to be a researcher in 15 minutes, and I'm gonna give you tips, and we're gonna have users, and I'm gonna show you how you can speak with users. Because what that does is that it opens up the value that research is bringing to a team, the value that research is bringing to an engineer, and they have better appreciation. They realize, wow, like one of the things that we teach them is like try not to ask leading questions, right? Like very neutral questions when you're interviewing someone. Then they realize, wow, it's much more difficult than it seems, right? Because we're in love with this product and we want to hear great things about it. So then they realize that it's definitely a skill. It's very important. I just finished a sprint on Wednesday, and we were thinking about this type of user as really needing a lot of data about how their program would work. And then what we realized through 2 rounds of research is that what they really, really, really care is to create a new program. And there is no tool to do that at Google for one specific area. So it completely shifted the way that we were looking at the space, and it shifted what we're going to end up coding. And the calls came actually from one engineer and one PM that were doing this research. So I'm of the school of thought of like, let's have everyone do research, speak with your users. No matter where you're working, you can get a hold of a user and just like have a conversation, like you said before, have a conversation, listen to your user. Oftentimes what you have in your head, it's not what the user needs. Like you convince yourself that what you want to build or what we want to build is what the user needs or what the user wants. And sometimes the reality is very different. So having that conversation allows us to be more aligned with the user needs to build great products.
Yeah, so I mean, your comment really goes back to what Kevin was saying about T-shaped people, right? Like, so you take your deep area of expertise and you, through collaboration, share that, and you help other people broaden the top list of their T.
Right.
But we still have this problem of we all have our own set of personal tasks, right? And what's the best way to strike a balance between collaboration and lots of meetings versus actually getting stuff done?
I could speak to one angle, but I think it's a very hard problem. Like I think even just meetings needs to be rethought across like all of the business world, because there's a lot there to rethink and redesign. But I will say that one thing that I think there's a time and place for everybody to be like uber collaborative, and then there's a time and place where we know what we want to do and we execute, and then we trust one another and we rely on the depth that everybody has. And I feel like coming back to visioning, I think that's one of the things that we try to do by helping a team create a clear vision for themselves, is once they, we talked about trust a lot, there's definitely the importance of trusting one another, but when they all trust in the same vision that they created, then I think it's time for people to execute, and there isn't a lot of churn, because I think a lot of times what happens is when people don't feel clear on what they're doing or don't agree or don't have confidence, there's a lot of churn and a lot of meetings, second guessing. When there's a clear vision and people feel like we know what we're building, we know why we're doing it, we're confident in it, then I think people can execute with less of a requirement for this uber collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, we've also talked a bit about prototyping, and it's been said fairly famously in the design world that a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So I mean, what does that process look like across Google? I mean, how does prototyping help us save time, but also actually create better products?
So what we do on Search and Maps is we have a UX engineering team that's about 17 people now, and they're partnered up with design partners. And so as soon as designers start doing design, we have people in the room who are actually going and building these things out. And we're starting to build up a culture more and more that as we go and present our ideas, we're bringing them in prototype form so people can play with them with real data and see what the actual experience looks like. And we want to make sure that the prototyping is thought of as part of the design, not a handoff, because when it comes too late, then you don't have people who are good UX engineers bringing ideas back in. You don't have that same situation. You may only get rushed, but when you have people who are right there thinking about it as the design evolves, then the prototype can evolve with it and be that design deliverable.
It's this phenomenon of guess-a-thons. I don't know if anyone's heard the term guess-a-thon, but I heard it recently. But it's like, I remember when we were working on YouTube Kids, we would be in meetings, so a bunch of people are in a meeting, and by the way, like none of them were parents. And then they're all speculating on what a parent would like and speculating on like what a 4-year-old would do or like. And then you'll even have someone like, well, my daughter can do such and such. And it's like, yeah, but you're like a VP at YouTube, and you know, your daughter's probably not representative of kids. And so I think the value of the prototyping is like, we can waste a lot of time having these guess-a-thons, or we can just build something and get a reality check very quickly. So I think that's the value of prototypes, is fewer guess-a-thons, which are frustrating to be in, usually don't result in the right answer, and take too much time.
I think even the act of creating a prototype is like, it's kind of rooted in empathy of like it forces you to think through how somebody else might encounter the thing. One thing that might be worth encouraging is just prototyping in any form is valuable, even if it's like a series of static images that you can flip through really quickly and get a sense for. It doesn't have to be like a complex code-based thing or a perfectly polished motion design. Like anything that allows you to show it to other people and have them evaluate it and give you their feelings about how it works is effective.
Awesome. So kind of to wrap up, we have a broad representation of all the different UX roles. There are lots of different design disciplines at Google, and there's lots of overlap with engineering, as we've seen. What do you look for in a candidate or in their portfolio when you're looking at designers who are applying to Google? And maybe Catherine, to start. Sure. You look like you're thinking really hard about this one.
Yeah, I'm like, what answer do I give here? No, for me, for the visual design role, for what I would hire for at Brand Studio, I just like a good way to see concepts, that they get their ideas down, right? That there's a strong concept behind a lot of work that they do, that there was a good idea there. I think style is something that you can learn. I think expression is something that you can hone, but like having that initial idea is really important. And then also, I really am a stickler for typography. If someone has good type in their book, I'm like, yep, hire them, get them in today. And then the last part is just someone that you're probably going to see this person more than you see your family, quite frankly, the person that you work with all day in and out. Are they a good human? Do you want to sit next to them? Do you want to go get a beer with them? That is another huge plus.
Yeah, and that's definitely like a general thing that we look for at Google. Yeah. Nicholas, I mean, you look at a lot of different roles.
Across any of them, like again, the ability to tell a story in any form. Mm-hmm. For engineers or others, like engineers or designers, it's just, when have they taken something they're passionate about and conveyed it to other people? And it doesn't really matter how they go about doing that.
Awesome. Anyone else have any?
Well, I think in the visioning work, we're kind of looking for all those attributes, but there are a few that we look for that I think are a little bit different. Because a lot of times what we're doing on a visioning project is we're taking something that's either really vague and undefined, or something that's kind of all sort of messed up. No one can really, we're stuck, we can't figure it out. And I think there are many folks who would like someone else to kind of clean that up for them and say, okay, you've got a good, clean brief, we know what we're doing, now go be a great designer, go be a great researcher. On our team, we've got to turn clarity out of ambiguity, we've got to untangle things. So the number one thing I look for is people who are comfortable with ambiguity, optimistic, are good leaders, and can make sense of messy stuff. So, that's kind of the number one thing we look for.
The storytelling is really important to me as well, but I love attention to detail and fundamentals in a designer or an engineer. Like, I love seeing people design forms when they apply, it sounds so rudimentary, like who wants to look at another form, but a form is such a telling piece of design if someone is a good interaction designer or not. You can really see the thought and the care that they've put into how a user will move between the fields and ultimately hit that submit button and complete their task.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for our Design Fireside Chat. I want to take the opportunity to thank everybody on the panel. I think we covered a lot of different topics. I hope it was useful to everyone watching. And yeah, thank you very much.